So how do I know who to select? Doesn't this seem difficult? I mean, if it's all going to ride on Jesus choosing 12 guys, what if you get it wrong? I mean, that's a pretty big deal, isn't it? And in fact, one of them betrayed him. Actually, 11 of them panned out. And so one of the first things I want to encourage all of us is to understand that this is something that it's easy to get wrong. And here's where we go wrong primarily. If you want to look, I'll be reading from 1 Samuel chapter 16. And it's the story of Samuel after Saul was rejected by God as king of Israel. He said to his prophet Samuel, he directed him to the house of Jesse, and he said, amongst his family, amongst his sons, I've chosen one of his sons to be the new king. And so Samuel finds Jesse. He comes up to him and says, I want to be able to meet your sons. And his oldest son is presented to him. And so in verse 6 of 1 Samuel 16, he says, when they came, his sons, he looked at Eliab and thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed, or the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. The Lord sees not as a man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. You see what went wrong here? This big, tall, good-looking guy, even Samuel, the prophet of God, said, he's the one. Look at this guy. He's just chisel of a man. People are going to follow him. Look at his stature. Look at how strong he is. Look at what a big guy he is. And God says, Samuel, you're looking at the outward appearance, but I see the heart, and I've rejected him. And so then the parade of brothers begins. And so brother number 2 comes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in each case, the Lord said, that's not the one. And then there's the youngest, the little shepherd boy, who's out with the sheep, who has to get called from the pasture to come in to meet Samuel. And as he is greeted by Samuel, the Lord spoke to Samuel and said, this is the one that I have chosen, the most unlikely of characters. I mean, in this culture, the youngest didn't get made king. The youngest didn't get put forward. And this just goes to show what God does and what God sees. God saw his heart. God saw him out there with the sheepfolds, and he was singing those praises to God and writing much of the beautiful worship and music that is now recorded for us today. David developed that heart as a shepherd out in the fields. It's in the fields that this young teenager learned to have faith in God, because when the lion and the bear came up against him, he had faith to strike them down. He had courage to strike them down. And God saw what was in this young man's heart, and he chose him to be the leader of his people. And so we too can fall into that trap, right? We can look at somebody and say, well, wow, that person's going to be a great leader. Well, I want to help you to avoid that trap of they kind of look good on the outside. How can you tell what's going on the inside? Because that's what you want. You want the person that God has chosen for this. Well, the first principle is we should pray. Jesus, the night before he chose his 12 disciples in Luke chapter 6, verse 12, said that he prayed all night. And so, seriously, God will give you wisdom in prayer. Engage in prayer. Take this to the Lord in prayer and say, Lord, I'd really like to see my group multiply. I'd really like to see leaders multiply in my group. Can you give us leaders? God loves that prayer. And I've seen that prayer answered so many times. So I want to encourage you, boldly pray that prayer like Jesus did.